Donald Trump started his presidency by announcing a sweeping cultural victory. Everybody was doing his dance. The podcast bros couldn't shut up about him, and he was already slapping his name in gold on everything he could reach. Well, the party's over. Literally. In less than 18 months, he bankrupted his brand, the economy, and the American dream. It's not hyperbole to say that Donald Trump is officially the most toxic man in America. He wanted to be the most powerful, most respected, and most beloved president of all time, but it turns out that body, mind, and soul are rancid, and everyone is backing away from him. They're even literally ripping his name off the Kennedy Center. It never should have been there to start. He's radioactive, rotting from the inside, and I can't even imagine the smell. His 80th birthday is in 2 weeks, and nobody wants to come. So he's canceling the party. The petulant child president is taking his ball and going home to sulk, writing on Truth Social that, quite frankly, instead of having overpriced singers who nobody wants to hear, whose music is boring and yet do nothing but complain, cancel it. Just cancel it like I canceled my involvement with the failing and unsafe to be in Kennedy Center. The oldest man, baby, ever sworn in as president, and he's stumbling into another year of dementia. The guy who can barely stay awake wants to show everyone how strong he is by having a cage fight on the White House lawn, except he can't fill the seats. Even Joe Rogan thinks he's being weird. Everything is falling apart. The acts at his birthday bash, they keep dropping out, and Trump is now handpicking the crowd himself because he knows if he doesn't, the lawn is empty. Young conservatives think he's a loser. The Turning Point crowds aren't showing up anymore. He's not cool. He's not feared. He's a sad meme, a slouching, dying old man throwing himself a party that no one will attend while everyone waits with bated breath for the day that it happens. And the whole Republican Party, they're strapped to this zombie shuffling off a cliff, and they can't bail out because they tied their entire future to a man in obvious cognitive decline who does not care about them. He does not care about you. He doesn't care about the price of gas or groceries. He cares about one thing: the legacy, the ballroom, his name bolted onto buildings, a toxic, lonely, 80-year-old loser, and the cowards are chained to him. That's the story. That's the story, and it's the only way to cover it. But the mainstream media hasn't. And that is why I'm excited to be launching this show and be joined by our first three guests who are paving the way and showing us how it should be done and shaping the conversations we need to be having. Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, and Joy Reid are all next with me, with you, on Sunday.
I think they're about to pop in.
Jack Cocchiarella, great to meet you, Senator.
Jack, how are you?
Doing well.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, and we desperately need an alternative media. So.
We certainly do, and I think really at this point, the alternative media is a lot closer to the mainstream than the mainstream media is. Senator Sanders, thank you so much for joining me. You are the longest serving independent in our Congress, but I think since the re-election of Donald Trump, you have kind of become, in many more ways than one, the leader of the Democratic Party, certainly a movement against Donald Trump. And against the establishment at large. You see that in the candidates that you've endorsed in primaries, like Graham Plattner's, Ram Mamdani. These are people who went up against the Democratic establishment and won. And that is the winning message. Right now, for so long, the argument has been that progressive opposition is not electable. We're seeing that's not the case anymore because we're running against systems. So how do we make sure that that continues
well, first
into
thought,
the midterms?
I think the key point to understand is the Democratic establishment, which is funded by very, very wealthy people and super PACs, that is managed by consultants who really have lost contact with real people in America. They're way out of touch. Yeah. Bottom line here is that both economically and politically, the system is broken. All right. When you have the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 93%, when you have one man, Mr. Musk, owning more wealth than the bottom 53%, when you have real inflation accounted for wages not rising over the last 53 years, you tell me whether this economy is working for working families. Your generation, unless we change it, in the richest country on earth will have a lower standard of living than your parents. All right? In 1991, people who were 28 years of age were able to purchase their first home. Now, you got to be 40. So what the hell is going on? And does anybody really believe that tinkering around the edges is going to bring about the changes that we need? I think the American people do not. What they want is a bold agenda, and that's what progressives are offering.
Yeah, and I think that so many are being confronted with that right now in ways that they never have been. Like, I've seen all of these clips, I'm sure you have as well, of graduations where they're announcing, oh, this is going to be done with AI, or it's former Google CEOs talking about, oh, AI, this, and then just the boos are what my generation feels. We're disgusted with it.
I talk to a lot of young people sitting right around this table, come here to Washington, and I said, tell me, how you feeling about having kids? As you know, the birth rate in the United States, around the world, is going down. And they shake their heads, and they talk about AI. What kind of economy is going to exist? Will I have a decent paying job? I can't afford housing, certainly can't afford childcare. Will I, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So they're looking at a world with enormous anxiety. And we have got to address these issues. And what we see now is a growing oligarchy of people with incredible wealth and incredible power. They want it all, and we've got to stop them.
And they're also lecturing at us to do something we want to. You know, that people want to have kids. Like, you would be hard pressed to find examples in the history of life on Earth in which mammals do not have kids.
Yes.
It's the thing that happens. And so to beat a mammal into submission to not be having children, it's something that we want to do, but the responsibility has been flipped on to us for some reason. And I wanted to talk to you, I said about this Kevin O'Leary clip. I don't know if there's more kind of smug, I'll say assholes, than him out there in the media. But this is something that he had to say about my generation and our financial choices.
Can't stand it when I see kids that are making 70 grand a year spending $28 for lunch. I mean, that's just stupid. It's just, think about that in the context of that being put into an index and making 8 to 10% a year for the next 50 years.
I don't know how many 20-somethings Kevin O'Leary knows who are making $70K. I also don't know if he realized that lunch approximately does cost $20 to $28. Someone responded to that tweet and said Kevin O'Leary has a restaurant in which he charges $11 for fries. So I don't think that he realizes, yes, things are expensive because of the billionaire class, because of the people who hoard the wealth.
All right. It is what you have right now is people who are like O'Leary, who are completely separated from the reality that ordinary Americans are experiencing. They haven't a clue. They live in their own world. And because many of them are smart and they work hard and they've made a lot of money, you know what they think? They think they have the divine right to rule. And many of these guys, I don't know about O'Leary, many of these guys do not believe in democracy. They don't. No. Their attitude is, hey, I am worth a couple of $100 billion. I have enormous power. I'm determining the future of the world. You think that I'm going to submit to some vote that you cast? And it ain't going to happen that way. I run the world, kid, and you better understand that.
Yeah, it's not fun. I laugh. It's not funny. It's
no, it is a tragedy, and it is the issue that we have got to deal with. Taking on the oligarchs, creating a vibrant democracy rather than billionaires and their super PACs controlling the political process is what we got to do. So 2 issues. We got to create an economy that works for all, not just the billionaires. We got to create a political system which billionaire super PACs do not elect candidates and defeat those of us who are fighting for working families.
And you've been pushing for that in our Democratic primaries, in our general election, saying that this is not what Democrats should be doing. Besides the fact that that is just morally right, can you talk about why you think that that would bring us electoral success, being against the dark money, being against the billionaire money, being against the foreign lobby money?
Truth of the matter is, and polling suggests this, it doesn't matter whether you're a right-wing Republican or a left-wing Democrat or a socialist or progressive, whatever you may be, who the hell thinks that in America, where people fought and died to defend democracy, you should have a situation where one guy, Mr. Musk, can spend $290 million to elect Trump. Who believes that it is okay that if you run for Congress and some billionaire doesn't like your views, that he or she can spend tens of millions of dollars to defeat you? Everybody understands, regardless of your political persuasion, the current political system is corrupt. It is dominated by billionaire super PACs, and we've got to end it. So long term, or as fast as we can, we got to get rid of the Citizens United. Short term, and we have legislation that we're introducing right now that would get billionaire super PACs out of the political process.
And I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about dark money in politics, thinking about the money spent for rather than the money against and the threats so many electeds face of, we're going to dump tens of billions of dollars against you if you oppose the Netanyahu government, if you oppose AI data centers. And people kind of forget about that, which is so funny going back to Kevin O'Leary, that he is accusing protesters in Utah who do not want an AI data center twice the size of Manhattan that would spend more energy, cost more energy, the entire state of Utah. He's saying that they're agents of China, that they're paid protesters. We're always paid protesters. We can't afford food,
Look,
but
these
we're also
guys
paid
are
protesters.
intellectually bankrupt.
Yes.
All right, and they cannot develop a rational argument which says that maybe it is a bit insane to destroy the environment, to raise electric rates, to force to utilize water resources in communities that are struggling with water. Maybe it's a little bit crazy to come up with a technology which is going to wipe out tens of millions of jobs. We're seeing it right now. Mr. Bezos has proposed a $100 billion fund. You know what? To quote unquote automate factories. You know what that means?
Job loss.
That is the job loss? No, that means the end of manufacturing jobs in America. We're looking at driverless vehicles. You know what that means? No more truck drivers coming. Do we have any plan in terms of how to protect those workers? We're looking at a mass invasion of privacy. Palantir and other companies know every damn thing that you do, where you go, what you shop, what your medical records are. We're looking at a mental health crisis where kids in America have their best friends, not classmates, not their neighbors, but AI bots. And we're looking, by the way, at an existential threat where many scientists believe, no longer science fiction, that if AI becomes smarter than human beings, it could become independent of human control with cataclysmic or catastrophic implications. That's what we're looking at.
And it's why we need to move forward with strict regulation
You
now.
got it.
You've proposed a moratorium on AI data centers. Can you talk about what that would mean for the average American?
What it means is we slow it up. In my view, it is insane that a dozen multi-billionaires, Bezos, Musk, Ellison, Zuckerberg, the richest people on earth, are pushing forward with a technology that is going to transform every aspect of human life, and ordinary people have no say in it at all. Gee whiz, millions of jobs are going to be gone. What is the alternative? What are we going to do about it? Privacy is going to be invaded. What are we going to do about it? What about the existential threat? Should we just keep going? The AI companies themselves will tell you, we really don't know where the technology is going. We don't understand it.
Claude told you.
That's right. We don't understand it. Well, maybe we got to slow it down to make sure that AI and robotics works for human beings. And what I worry about is not only the economics, not only the privacy, not only the environmental aspects. Musk talks about a world in which there are billions of robots. You go to the doctor, it's a robot. Your kid is being taught by a robot.
The isolation.
That's right.
It's the thing I worry about most with my generation. It really is. It's social media, it's predatory gambling companies. Do you know how much money Polymarket and Kalshi and all of these companies are spending on political influencers, both right and left, which is deeply disappointing to me? Don Jr., if he's on the board of a company, maybe don't take their money, is what I say to these people. But they're coming for every second of our lives. Like, these CEOs have stated that they don't want us sleeping so that they can get our data. It is the most damaging thing in our generation. And for the people who say, and sorry that this is my little rant here because it just infuriates me, but say that
rant, you should be ranting.
But they tell us you would need to have kids, you need to do this, and I can't stand them telling us to have kids when they're stripping away, you know, a woman's right to choose autonomy over her body, our healthcare, the ability to have childcare. But then they tell us to have children in an environment in which we can't, and they don't want to supply anything. Isolation is stopping that from happening.
You're touching on a number of issues,
Yeah.
all of which are important, and you should rant, and your generation should rant and
do.
say, hey, it's our world, not Mr. Musk's and not Mr. Bezos. What kind of world do we want? You want a world in which the United States joins every other major country and guarantees healthcare to all? How about that? A world in which the top 1% does not own more than the bottom 93%, where all of our people have a decent standard of living. I think that's a terribly radical idea. A world in which we are addressing not only AI, but climate change, the real existential threat that exists there as well. a world in which we have a vibrant democracy where you got to vote, I got to vote, and billionaires do not buy elections. I don't think it's a very radical ideas. But what you have right now is these guys not only control the economy, not only control increasingly the media to shape what the discussion will be. The points you're making are on the minds of tens of millions of Americans. They ain't being discussed on CBS or NBC a whole lot. And they're not going to be discussed, in Musk's world as well. So we have got to force discussion on these issues. And in my view, the American people share the concerns that you've been raising.
Yeah, and I think we all share the concerns of the social isolation that comes with all of these things. For people in my generation, besides pushing for and voting for progressive policies that would solve some of the problems that are keeping us from each other, AI, extreme cost of living, the fact that we don't even have freedom to live. Do you have any dating advice for young people in this moment? I'm serious.
No, I tell you, the world is changing so fast. I mean, that is part of the anxiety.
Yeah.
Every day you read a new breakthrough in AI, you hear Trump saying another bloody crazy thing, and people are really confused. I think, again, when I talk about slowing it down, I can tell you, here's just the personal example of this. We hire a lot of young people to help us answer the phones. We use human beings to answer the phones. We don't use machines. And what we have found is that many of the young people are not all that comfortable on the phone, right? Somebody from Vermont calls up with a problem, right? That's what our job is. We do casework, right? Yeah. Problem with Social Security, with Medicare, with Veterans Administration. And our young people have a hard time communicating on the phone because they text so much. All right. What we have got to, I think, appreciate, and you're making this point, is at the end of the day, you know what we got? We got human beings. That's all we got. And we got to start face-to-face relating to human beings. It's hard for my generation to know. When I talk to the young people in my office, many of them have gotten married or have girlfriends, boyfriends, through social apps, right? That's what your generation does, right?
That's okay.
Okay. And it would have been unthinkable, back in the day, people actually met people. They met them at work, they met them in social activities or whatever it is. So I think we have got to kind of put down the screens a little bit, and deal with human beings, all the pluses and minuses of who we are as human beings, face to face.
So put yourself out there a little bit more.
Put yourself out there. You may get your feelings hurt. All right, that's being human. You may get disappointed in love. That's human. Deal with it.
As long as you're loving, you're winning is kind of your your take on it. Well, to come back to something that we were talking about a little bit earlier with the people who kind of see themselves as above us all regular people, and I kind of said this before we got started, that the business people think that they're the new sages of America.
Don't even use the word business people.
Tell me why not.
Because business people, the guy down the shop who owns a mom and pop is a business guy. Somebody who owns a company with 30 people is a business person. These people are not business people. They are oligarchs.
And hoarders.
But they are enormously powerful people, all right, who are every day working aggressively to transform the entire planet. They think they are God. The God 7 days to create the earth. These guys take them a little bit longer, but they're working hard at it.
Yeah.
And again, because they live in this elite world where the idea of money, they have so much money they can spend it, they take care of their families for 1,000 generations. And they don't hear criticism. The criticism doesn't matter. They own the media. They can do any damn thing they want. You oppose them, they'll spend $10 million to defeat you in an election. All right, that is what we are taking on. And these people are not nice people. They're greedy people. They are prepared to fight for tax breaks for themselves, despite the fact that children will go hungry as a result, or our schools will deteriorate. They want it all, and we've got to stand up to them.
And they want us to believe, maybe, worst of all, they do a lot of bad shit, but worst of all, that there's nothing that we can do. And that was kind of the pessimistic view that Jeff Bezos brought. Again, I'm sorry that I'm making you watch another asshole billionaire, but this is what Jeff Bezos had to say about paying more in taxes.
I pay billions of dollars in taxes. And it's a perfect, again, if people want me to pay more billions, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you.
I promise you, Jeff, that you're dead wrong. Of course it will help that teacher in Queens. And, it's interesting. I'm glad you played the Bezos clip. As you know, you may know, in California now there's an effort to have a billionaire's tax.
Yes.
And Bezos says, let's have that debate, right? Mm-hmm. They're not having that. Do you know what they're doing in California? You know what they're doing in New York when Mamdani wants to raise taxes on the rich? You know what they do in response to the wealth tax that I have introduced here in Washington? They're not having that debate as to whether or not billionaires should pay their fair share as opposed to people losing their health care or children going hungry. What they are saying is, you raise my taxes in California. You know what I'm doing? What am I doing?
I'm leaving.
I'm leaving the state.
Yeah.
And I'm going to shut down my company and you're going to be unemployed. That's the debate. That's not a debate. That is my power over you. That is extortion.
It's extortion.
That is blackmail. Heads I win, tails you lose. You can't beat me. So Bezos says, let's have that debate. Exactly right. Let's have that debate. Tell me, Mr. Bezos, why you think you are worth many, many hundreds of billions of dollars while you pay your workers at Amazon starvation wages. Tell me why you think you have the right to automate factories all over America and the world and throw millions of people out of work. What gives you unilaterally that right? Let's have that debate, Mr. Bezos.
Yeah, they don't want to have the debate. They just want to push the narrative that I'm glad our friends, Mr. Mayor Zohran Mamdani, was working to dispel invoking that Ronald Reagan quote in which he said, the scariest thing that someone can say is that I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And he said, that's not true. The worst thing is that I'm working 2 jobs, I can't feed my kids. Right. And that we need to show that big, bold, progressive change can work and affect
what we
people's
have
lives.
here, and it's a real issue, is if you're a progressive, you can go out there and you give a great speech, fine, you're saying all the right things, you're right on the issues, great. Can you run a government? Can you be a good mayor? Can you be a good governor? All right. And what Mamdani is doing is showing that you can have a democratic socialist, a progressive ideology, and you can run a city. You know what? New York City had really serious snowstorms. It meant that people can't get to work, kids couldn't get to school, ambulances couldn't get people to the hospital. You know what he did? He got the bloody snow off the ground, and he did a great job on that. People in New York City desperately need childcare, as they do in Vermont, as they do all over the country. He is now instituting free childcare for the people of New York City. That is really good. Working class people need to buy affordable, decent quality food for their kids. He's starting to put grocery stores, municipally funded grocery stores in low-income and working class areas. That's good. So the point is, we have got to have progressives who are not only right on the issues, and I speak as a mayor, somebody who's a mayor for 8 years. You got to know how to run a government. You got to cut through the bureaucracy. You got to stand up for working class people. You got to create the best educational system in the world that we can. You got to make the system work efficiently.
I remember when Mayor Mamdani had won the primary and there was all the fear-mongering of Fox and also by a lot of those in the establishment, the Democratic Party, saying that Republicans are going to take him and use him and run against him all over the country, that he's going to be the example that they point to. It's going to be terrible. Things are going to be falling out of the sky. What's happening? It's going to be, and now he's killing it. And he's maybe behind yourself, one of the most popular politicians in the country.
Wherever I go around the country, and it's important. The reason I talk about Mamdani, he's a friend of mine. But on top of that, and he's a very good mayor, he's done a great job.
Yes.
Is from a political point of view, I think a lot of progressives are saying, God, how do we take on all of this big money? How do we take on Trump? Just take a look. Forget what Mamdani is doing as mayor. Think about his campaign. Guy started at 1% in the polls. How's that?
I was there. I was talking to him. I was loving it.
He took on the Democratic establishment, took on the Republican establishment, took on the President of the United States, took on the oligarchs in New York City, and you know what? He won a strong victory. How's that? The reason he did that is he motivated and excited people, had 100,000 people in New York City out on the street. That is the model that we have got to emulate all over this country. And in many ways, Grant Platinum is running one of the most rural states in America. It ain't New York City. It's a small state. It is a very rural state. But he is, in his own way, doing exactly what Mamdani has done. We're seeing other candidates, Abdul El Sayed in Michigan doing it. We're seeing candidates running for the House doing it. Ana Lilia Mejia in New Jersey is an old friend of mine, worked on a presidential campaign. She started the race, almost nobody knew who she was, union organizer. And she put together a strong grassroots movement. She's now the Congresswoman from New Jersey. It can be done when you build a strong grassroots movement, when you have an agenda that speaks to the needs of working people, that gets people excited. That is what the establishment doesn't know. I keep getting asked here by media on Capitol Hill, what should the message be? It's not a question of messaging. It's a question of what you stand for.
It's so funny that you say that, because I watched a clip of a podcast that just came across my Instagram feed, and it was someone talking about how you are able to go and speak to Tim Dillon or Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and whomever.
And you!
And me. We'll let me in there as well. And nobody ever thinks that Bernie is catering or changing or trying to say something different. And like, it's such a great talent that he's able to do that. And I don't understand how they don't know that it's because you have a worldview and because you are who you are and always will be, and you're coming from the place and the ideas that you believe. And it's funny that the establishment, and it's probably because they're poll testing, grabbing from here and there and whatever. I like that phrase, and I like this logo, the slogan, that they don't understand that coming from a worldview is what someone trusts and believes.
And it's not only coming from a consistent worldview, it's where your heart is, where your soul is. I grew up in a family that did not have a lot of money, all right? So I understood what that was about. And what I learned as a kid, the experiences that my parents had to go through, the struggles that they had to go through, the disappointments that they had, that's where I am today. And what my family had to go through, now tens of millions of families are going through, many ways in worse situations. That's what I believe. And I believe in democracy, and I believe in social justice, and I believe that it is insane that one person owns more wealth than the bottom 53%. Yeah. I think it's tragic that in our great country, where so many people fought and died to defend democracy, people are giving up. Do you know why Trump has the degree of support, not very popular, very unpopular, but he has a nucleus of support? And that is, people say, I go out and I vote every 2 years. You tell me to vote every 4 years. Yeah. So what? I'm going nowhere in a hurry. My kid is even worse. Yeah. Democracy is not working. You know what I need? I need a strong guy. I don't give a damn about the Constitution, the rule of law. Give me some guy who's going to crack some heads. I love Donald Trump. All right? And it's not just in this country. You're seeing this all over the world. So what we have got to do is make democracy work for working people. If tomorrow, God willing, we were to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system so that everybody in this country, you're rich, you're poor, middle class, whatever you are, can get quality health care without taking out their wallet or their credit card, which, by the way, exists in Canada, 50 miles away from where I live, where we had enough doctors and nurses in the richest country on earth. People would say, you know what, the democracy, that ain't a bad idea. Just took my kid to the doctor. We had an operation. It didn't cost me. That's a pretty, and you know what? My kid is going to college now, really good school, and it's tuition free. I like democracy. Yeah. All right. So democracy is more than just having elections every 2 or 4 years. It is delivering for the people. And the problem that we're having right now is because the oligarchs increasingly control our democracy. Democracy can't deliver. People are giving up.
I said at the start, I appreciate you being the leader of this opposition, leader of these ideas for so long throughout your entire career. I'm glad to see that this is starting to be recognized, embraced.
Okay, and I want people to know that, yes, we are. I think we have the momentum. People are tired of the status quo, and we're winning elections, and we're building a strong movement. Keep the faith.
Keep the faith. And I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you for the time. I hope we didn't run over too much. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry I had to make you listen to Jeff Bezos and Kevin Owens.
No. Actually,
I felt so bad.
Listen, the stuff that you're doing is very important.
Thank you.
It is, I have real problems with the internet and all that stuff.
Believe you me, I do as well.
Right. The positive thing is progressive voices are getting a chance to be heard. So keep it up.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And happy birthday.
Thank you so much. What an absolute pleasure speaking with Senator Bernie Sanders. Up next to discuss the latest Epstein news and the future of the Democratic Party, Congressman Ro Khanna. Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of On Sunday. You've always been such a big supporter of the work that we're doing in independent media, so I really appreciate it.
Well, first of all, Jack, congratulations. And what an honor to be on your first show with Bernie Sanders, with the great Bernie Sanders and Joy Reid. So I am honored.
A big lineup, and we got a lot of big news to cover. I wanted to start with Pam Bondi and kind of the pseudo deposition that went on Friday. With her, it seemed like repeatedly trying to shift the blame to Todd Blanche, which honestly, this is Donald Trump's personal lawyer. I wouldn't be surprised if he had handled most of the Epstein cover up. Do you believe what Bondi is saying, that Blanche was more responsible and kind of maybe should face more of the blame? Not to say that Pam Bondi did nothing wrong, but for the cover up of the Epstein files.
I do believe that Blanche was more responsible and Kash Patel was more responsible. That doesn't absolve Bondi about the fact that there haven't been no investigations or prosecutions, about the fact that she refused to meet with the survivors' lawyers, about the fact that she misled the country when she said that the Epstein files and client list was on her desk. But the reality is there are two things she pointed out that are important for people to understand. The files she got from the FBI at the Justice Department, they themselves had missing documents and had excessive redactions. And that's an issue with the FBI. The FBI redacted a lot of the survivors' statements naming names. And secondly, Todd Blanche really has overseen all of this and is part of the reason we don't have the remaining files out and that we don't have any investigations and prosecutions.
Well, you bring up the fact that there was already the obstruction and what was, redacted from the FBI, but also maybe more importantly, what was unredacted. It seems like this is a very targeted effort to share the names of multiple Jane Does who had never been made public before. Do you think that rises to the level of witness intimidation or witness tampering from those seeking to scare anyone from talking about the files?
It could. I believe it's first largely incompetence and indifference. The fact that they did not meet with survivors groups, survivors lawyers, a lot of this could have been avoided, and they just were callous about it. In some cases, there may, if there is evidence that there was actually intentional leaks, I mean, that's a very serious criminal matter, and we should investigate it. And the reason I'm careful is I've always spoken, as has Thomas, very precisely, because we want to give people the facts. And the real facts are, and the bottom line is that this Justice Department is investigating and prosecuting Jean Carroll, a sexual assault survivor, while they have not launched a single investigation or prosecution of anyone in the Epstein files.
Yeah, and they've stood in the way of, again, countless hearings. Your colleague Maxwell Frost made it very clear that the Oversight Committee has effectively, as much as Mike Johnson and James Comer can, have neutered it, have stopped, anyone from going under oath, any new information being submitted into the congressional record. Again, these are legal questions, but do you think that represents some level of obstruction of justice from these offices, from Comer, from Johnson, that should be something that should face more legal accountability?
Well, the accountability has to be of Kash Patel and Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi and the justice officials. But I think what was happened is that the Comer has made this totally partisan. I mean, he used 2-3 months to go on a witch hunt for the Clintons, who haven't been in office for 20 years. And yet he didn't have Pam Bondi under oath. He didn't have Pam Bondi's testimony public. He did not have Lutnick under oath. He did not have Lutnick's testimony public. He has not called the people on the FBI who scrubbed these files. He has not called the people in the Justice Department to explain why there have not been no prosecutions. I'm not out to get Comey or Johnson, where we're going to beat them in the political sphere. I'm out to get justice for survivors. And the problem is that this Congress, like they have for so many things in the Trump administration, has covered up. And that's why we need Robert Garcia as chair. That's why we need Hakeem Jeffries as speaker. That's why we need an Epstein subcommittee that is actually going to hold accountable FBI and justice for their law breaking.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it likely won't feature some Republicans who have been part of the effort to release the Epstein files. Of course, Thomas Massie, fortunately losing his race a few days ago. We saw Marjorie Taylor Greene months ago resign from Congress. Nancy Mace will not be in the Congress. And Donald Trump is trying to get Lauren Boebert to kicked out of her seat, although it seems like a futile quest there. But Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene have both been making some headlines recently for some comments that they've made about their futures and, of course, the wake of Donald Trump's attacks. Thomas Massie, at the rally that he held, the the unfortunate defeat party that he held. He got a lot of chance of 2028. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was just posting poly market odds of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and saying that maybe some more America First candidates should be considered in the run-up to the 2028 Republican primary. Do you think that Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene should throw their hat in the ring and run for president in 2028?
Well, I'll leave it up to them, but I will say this, that they've shown more independence than almost anyone on the other side. And on the Epstein matter, we worked in a very constructive way. We would have never gotten the Epstein files passed. You know, I believe, like Malcolm X, that I would work with anybody, anywhere, anytime, if it's to solve a problem. That's basically a paraphrase of Malcolm X. And that's what we did with Thomas and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace, despite enormous differences. And they have two things where we agreed. One is that you can't have an Epstein class, a group of rich and wealthy people who get away with things because of their money and power in raping or trafficking underage girls. And two, that we need a foreign policy where we're not going in these foreign wars in Iran or giving a blank check to Israel as they commit genocide, and that we need to have a foreign policy that stands up for basic human rights.
I want to come back to the conversation around Massie's future, as well as yours in a little bit, but I want to stay on this with regards to working with Republicans. AOC went pretty viral for an answer to a question that she was given, I believe it was at the University of Chicago, when she was asked about working with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, of course, you worked with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, Nancy Mason, Lauren Boebert. When there was an issue ahead of you that joining forces and pushing back against this Trump administration meant accomplishing something big and important, but it was set out before you. Do you think there is a difference between the ideal version of maybe working with Republicans one day and working with Republicans on a stated goal ahead? Of course, AOC pushed back on the idea of kind of folding Marjorie Taylor Greene into the tent more broadly. Do you have a different thought on that?
I think what she was saying is we can't compromise our values. We can't say, okay, I'm going to work with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Thomas Massie, and now I'm not going to speak out about women's rights or black rights or the fact that this Dred Scott court is disenfranchising the political representation in the South, or Lake and Raleigh, right? I mean, I spoke out about saying there was terrible judgment for people to be voting for Lake and Raleigh. Let me tell you, Marjorie Taylor Greene would not agree with that as a representative from Georgia. She would think that I was totally wrong. So we cannot compromise our values or trim our sails to seek a coalition with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene. That said, if Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, I agree on the Epstein files, if I didn't work with her, if I didn't have a relationship to be able to do that, we wouldn't have the Epstein files released. If Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene or others were not willing to work on the Iran War Powers resolution, we wouldn't have an Iran War Powers resolution to vote on next week. So that's why I quote Malcolm X. He didn't give up his values, but he said, anytime, anywhere, anybody, if they're in it to solve a problem.
Yeah. And what problem do you think maybe you have the ability to solve in the future with Thomas Massie? Of course, in these next couple of months, while he's still in the Congress, but maybe after that, how do you envision maybe, of course, y'all have a very, strong connection. You've accomplished a lot. Do you envision that being something that carries on past 2027 with you and Congressman Massie?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't underestimate Thomas's last 6 months. It's going to be quite a
I
ride.
would not either. He's going to read the Epstein list, isn't he?
And we're strategizing on how we get more of the names out. We're strategizing on how we get more accountability right now with the Justice Department and the release of the rest of the files. We have already, because of our work, forced the resignations of about 20 powerful people in different offices. And how do we continue to have accountability? But beyond that, there are places that I do think there could be some common ground in terms of standing up against these foreign wars, in terms of standing up against a blank check to Israel. I believe we should have no aid to Israel. I believe what they did was a genocide. I believe that we should not be providing arms that are killing civilians. So that's an area. In terms of saying that we should not have an Epstein class, a donor class dominating our politics, we need to be for the working class. Those are themes where we can work together. We may have different solutions. I don't think Thomas is going to be endorsing a $25 minimum wage like I have, but we can form a populist, progressive coalition in this country that wins back a lot of the voters who voted for Trump. Remember, Thomas carried voters under 50 by 30 points. Even if we get some of them, that's the path to a majority around this country.
Yeah, and that takes re-envisioning what the Democratic Party is. You've certainly been doing that. You were just down in South Carolina. I want to talk about that in a second, but you made some big news with what I wouldn't really call that controversial of a statement. You kind of referenced it earlier. I want to read word for word. You said, no one who voted for the Laken-Riley Act should have any role in the future leadership of the Democratic Party in this country. It's disqualifying, just like the Iraq War vote. Do you think that there are other issues that are disqualifying as well that we have seen Democrats, maybe in swing states, maybe those talking about running for president? Do you think there are issues like a vote for the Laken-Riley Act that you would consider disqualifying as well?
Let me say what I meant there very clearly. I said that there's certain issues of principle that show whether you're willing to fight against Donald Trump when it is not politically convenient. When I went and voted against Laken-Riley, I went on Bill Maher the month after, and I still remember Stephen A. demolished me in the debate because he made me look like I was this too principled, progressive guy standing up for due process. Well, that vote, which was politically opportunistic at the time, gave a permission structure for ICE to be able to go deport people without due process. And here's the point. If someone says, okay, look, I cast that vote, I made a mistake, I do a mea culpa, fine. But you can't just go and say, that's okay, let's just put that in the back burner and have no explanation for that, then and expect to lead the party. That you have to take ownership for that moment. And then if you've learned from it and you regret it, then explain that. And I'm all for a big tent if people have those moments. I do believe that calling out the genocide is another clear moral test. I do believe that being willing to say you're going to have a wealth tax on billionaires, actually go tax billionaires, is a sense of meeting the moment and the time. I personally believe the principle that healthcare is a human right on Medicare for all is one of those issues. That's why you have campaigns, and that's why I'm supporting a lot of these progressive candidates like Graham Plattner and Abdul Saeed and Anna Lilia Meha in 2026.
Yeah, and you've really, again, been one of the most talked about, and we don't have to get into necessarily the question of what's going to be happening in 2028, but certainly a lot of people have been chattering, have been talking, especially with you taking a trip down to South Carolina, seeing Congressman Clyburn and attending what is a kind of a tee-off event and the fish fry. Can you tell us a little bit about the speech you gave down in South Carolina?
Well, what I was trying to do is say that the progressive movement really has its roots in the Black freedom movement. Because a lot of people think that, oh, well, why is a progressive down in South Carolina? I thought the South Carolina is the place for centrists and moderates. And I said, look, the progressive movement has roots in W.E.B. Du Bois saying that economic equality is required for political equality, in A. Philip Randolph, who organized porters and labor with civil rights, in Bayard Rustin, who did the Freedom March, of course, the March on Washington for jobs and came up with the Freedom Budget, in Dr. King, who articulated economic justice, and in two campaigns that Reverend Jackson ran and won in South Carolina in 84 and 88, where Jackson actually was talking about Palestinian self-determination back in the 1980s. And so this idea that the Black South is not progressive is just ahistorical. In fact, it's the Black South, along with the populist and the progressive movement, that has influenced and helped and shaped the entire progressive movement. You could argue the Montgomery bus boycott is one of the most progressive things that ever happened in America.
Yeah, and I think that is something that you will continue, I expect, to draw on as inspiration and reflecting and using that history to guide the future of the Democratic Party. I just want to ask one more question. What do you think is the issue, not that we should be saying if a Democrat has not gotten on board with this, they're disqualified. But, a Democrat should want to be getting on board with, because it's not being talked about enough. What do you think is the issue in our party, I should say, that needs to be discussed more, that maybe is a little under the radar, not because people are afraid of it, but just because they haven't thought about it enough?
AI. And are we going to allow AI to continue to have tech billionaires build massive fortunes, or are we going to have an AI that's actually for the people in the working class? Two ideas there. We need to be taxing agentic AI more than we tax human workers. We need to stop data centers from extracting natural resources, water, or sticking local communities with the electricity bill. I have a 7-point plan for how to make AI something that helps working families, not just the tech billionaires in my district. But that, in my view, is a key for the future.
Absolutely. It's what we spoke with Senator Bernie Sanders about earlier in the show. I know you two, as always, working together, will do so on AI, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining the show, Congressman. As
Thank
always,
you,
I
Jack.
really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Always great chatting with Ro. Up next, a conversation about the direction of media, new and old, with my friend and the host of the Joy Reid Show, Joy Reid. Joy, thank you so much for joining the show. Recently, you said that the mainstream media, and I would agree, is cooked. And then in this moment, you are not being part of the corporate media. For you, it's been a blessing. It's been a gift. What part of your independence right now do you think you're most grateful for?
Well, I think because when you're working for a corporation, you say what you believe, right? And there was never anybody saying, well, don't say this or don't say that. But in the back of your mind, that if you say particular things about, let's say, Donald Trump, or Gaza, that there's a good chance you're going to get that call from your boss saying, didn't like that, wouldn't advise that, maybe we should tone that down. Or if you put it in prompter that you really need to address something directly about the president that you think will make him uncomfortable, make him upset, that your bosses don't like it, right? And so now I don't have to worry about that. Because I think what's happened is that the media, they're not really in the news and information business. They have a bigger business, and they don't want what the anchors say, what 60 Minutes reports, to get in the way of the business that Paramount wants to do, that they need the White House's approval for. So it's just, there's a conflict of interest, I think, in corporate media, because the corporate part is about business. It's not about news and information.
Yeah. And could you take people behind that curtain a little bit? I saw a clip of you recently talking about your departure from MSNBC, in which that call of, we're kind of wrapping things up. It wasn't a call that had anything to do with, obviously, the very, highly rated nature of your show or the loyal audience or the reporting that you were doing, but it had kind of a coldness to it. It was very corporate. How was that call different than kind of what you had heard from the higher ups before? Or is that always the nature of what that sort of call sounded like?
Well, it's interesting because, I hadn't had a call like that ever. I've had 3 shows at MSNBC, and the first one I had was actually canceled, but I never got a call telling me it was canceled. I just found out on social media. They just leaked it and let it leak, and we just found out while we were on the air. So that didn't happen. And then the third show, the last call we had with management was that we won our second NAACP Image Award 2 weeks before that. So we had never had a call like that. But I think what happened is the communications with this particular management were just different from like the Phil Griffin era, when it was a lot more sort of interactive. This person I hadn't really interacted with that much. And all my interactions with her had been pretty, sort of formal, not very, not very extreme in any way. So I really didn't know what to expect, and certainly didn't expect that.
Is that what you're starting to hear from a lot more of your colleagues who have either, kind of seen the writing on the wall of where corporate media is going, or have gotten that kind of ominous, I'm reading a script type of call? Do you think it's like everything is kind of taking the same form in the Trump era, at least?
I think it is. I think probably, if you look at CBS, which to me is the biggest tragedy out of all of the networks of what's happened to it, you're seeing this sort of almost like mechanical, almost like factory-like deconstruction of these businesses, right? These companies are just coming apart. And, it's almost like a corporate restructuring, like, when a company takes over another company and then they just lay everybody off. That's kind of the mentality that you're now seeing in corporate media. They're no longer caring about the end product. There was a time when, and I worked very briefly at CBS, very briefly. I worked in standards and practices as like a secretary way, way back when I was on a break during my college years. And it was just different. The vibe was not corporate. The vibe was news. The vibe was media. The vibe was about the end product that was on the TV. But now it just feels like these corporations, they are like a factory that's just laying off all the line workers. They don't care. They don't care any more than the companies that lay off the line workers. They're exactly the same kind of business.
And it's funny to describe it as like that factory and just kind of like pumping out a goal, and the goal in mind, of course, is profit. These are corporations that's what they care about. But even when you look at the right wing independent media, or independent media, if you can call it that, like Ashley St. Clair, I don't know if you've been following a lot of what she's saying, but kind of exposing these group chats and the dark rooms and how they put together a narrative. And the corporate media has always played into that, and something that's been bouncing around my mind a lot lately. The person that they are coming to the biggest defense of right now is Donald Trump's wannabe boyfriend, Jackson Dart. For those not familiar, this is the quarterback of the New York Giants. He spoke at the Trump rally. He said he was so excited to meet the president. He loves the office and the White House. And it's always something that I see is just like the arrogance of, and whether it be the white athlete or white celebrity embracing Donald Trump. It's like you have black athletes on one hand, maligned for wanting to educate about, social justice and, the inequities of America throughout its entire history. And they're maligned for being like annoying or interrupting what should just be something that we enjoy in our sports. But then white athletes who arrogantly approach politics and talk about it from this very broad view that misunderstands it, that they are at least, defended by the right, or maybe the average person sees it as less of a crime. But I think that the annoyance is what the right tries to tap into most. They want to tell, LeBron James to shut up and dribble, and saying that you're interrupting what we want, which is just sports, and for you to be a performer or be a celebrity. I just wonder how we, especially through the lens of educating people on the historic oppression of Black people throughout America, that is the history, how do we get them to stop being so annoyed with learning?
I mean, they're never going to be annoyed with learning, right? I mean, exactly. The shut up and dribble is only if you are disrupting the status quo. I mean, sports has always been political, and it's always been used as Americana, right? And they love it when the athletes are representing America on the court or on the field. And that's what you're supposed to do. If you're waving the flag, that's fine. If you're challenging the flag or challenging the status quo in the country, that's a problem. And that's black athletes versus white athletes. It's always been that way. When Muhammad Ali is saying he won't go to Vietnam, no one questions, well, maybe we should interrogate a little bit more why we're fighting in Vietnam. Instead, they just call him unpatriotic and throw him in jail. And so, this has been the history of Black athletes really from the beginning. The only way to kind of be an acceptable Black athlete is to also wave the flag. But I have to say, as somebody who grew up as a Giants fan, I was repulsed by Jackson Dart. And first of all, he didn't say he was happy. He said he was pleasured to meet the president. Which is
what I think what Trump wanted to do was some pleasuring. It seems he's talking about the kids' lives a lot.
I'm pleasured to meet. Like, what does that even mean? First of all, he's an idiot. Okay, what do you mean you're pleasured to meet the president? Like, is English your first language? What are you saying, right? And so I was, really kind of repulsed as a Giants fan, former now, because the reality is Donald Trump is not a normal president. No. This isn't praising the presidency or praising the idea of America or an American president. Donald Trump is not an American president. Donald Trump is a wannabe king. And we're in the 250th anniversary of our divorce from the King of England. And Donald Trump is trying to be a king. He's putting monuments to himself all over Washington with his ugly, glowering face on the Justice Department, on the USDA building. He wants to build a giant ark like what Hitler wanted to build in Germany, that's going to dwarf the size of the Lincoln Memorial. He's destroyed the White House, destroyed the East Wing, turned it into like what looks like a cheapy Marriott, like with the ugly, concrete over Jackie O's garden. He's building a WWE like super center or something for him to do a stupid game in front of the White House. He's destroyed the Capitol. He's made tacky gold filament all over the East, all over the West Wing. Donald Trump has destroyed our country. And he's also behaving like Kim Jong-un. Why? And you're pleasured to meet him though, Jackson. I mean, look, what are you
And
talking
they
about?
talk about it like I'm a big fan of the presidency. It's like, what does that mean? I don't know why there's this like, I do because it's the status quo. And again, it is the arrogant view of this that I'm a big fan of the White House as an institution. It's like, well, if you're such a big fan, you could do some research. We could do which the right claims to love, but it's like maybe look into how the presidency is being used. It's just I don't know how these guys, well, I do know how these guys have gotten away with it, but the idea that you're just like a big fan of the president as just like a leader of the country, but you don't want to know any more of that is honestly embarrassing. Like it's something that these people should be embarrassed of, that they present themselves and kind of infantilize themselves in their engagement with our politics, and then yet they want to be taken seriously or just completely not held to account. Like it doesn't that seem to be what the right does? Like it is both that they are victims and they are children,
Yes.
but also that they are like, the conquering heroes of their own story. It's funny how they want to be all of those things.
It is insane, right? I mean, these are people who want the country to be praised as perfect. They don't want any flaws to be described in the history of the United States. And they want, as you said, to present America as this sort of conquering hero of a nation, but also they're whiny little bitches. Like everything, if you say that Stephen Miller is ugly, which is a fact.
He's fucking ugly. Like, can we be real about this? he's not a good looking guy.
Right. They cry and whine and, oh my God, you're so mean. It's like they want to be treated as children, right?
Yes.
As they're bratty little children. They want to be praised. They want to be petted. They want you to be pleasured to be in their presence. They want to come to the cookout, but then they want to like lock all the black and brown people up in a concentration camp at the cookout. They want to be cruel. They want to hurt people. They want to see people get hurt. They actually, like Trump, I think that's what they have in common with them. They enjoy the violence. They enjoy seeing people mass incarcerated. They enjoy seeing the arepa lady being thrown to the ground on the street. They want mass deportation, but they also want affection from us. They want our side to love them and include them. They want all the stars to show up for America 250. They want all their favorite Black celebrities to sing and dance for them, but they hate Black people and they hate brown people. But please play baseball for us and entertain us. They want to go to the World Cup and see Black and brown athletes, kick the soccer ball down the field, but they hate Black and brown people. I don't understand the psychology of it at all.
And they don't really seem to understand themselves, I guess, fully as well. And it's interesting, when you're talking about who allows this to kind of continue, a lot of it is the corporate status quo Democrat, right? Someone who says that they have a lot of respect for the office as well, the kind of the institution holder uppers. And I think that has been one of the biggest problems in this Trump era, and not taking seriously enough the damage that he has done in like an attempt, I guess, to preserve what they think will be the status quo, even though it's not. We're living in a completely different era than I think even anyone with the worst fears of what this Trump 2 would have looked like could have possibly imagined. And obviously, as is always the case in America, the attacks are happening on Black people first, right? And I don't know how we can get. And of course, the bigger problem is with Republicans, but a lot of Democrats who just don't want to meet the moment to see that. And even in a selfish way, that like what happens to Black people in America will ultimately happen to everyone else. We're seeing gerrymandering in the South before we see broad voter suppression in the midterms. We saw your show under assault before it was Colbert in 60 Minutes. Do you think that there is a possibility? We've been doing this for so long, but people start to wake up.
I don't know, because the problem with the Democrats and their institutionalism is that they don't understand how much the institution has devolved, right? They're defending a presidency that no longer exists. Donald Trump has blown through the guardrails of what we all thought the presidency looked like. So what are you defending? Because if you're defending the presidency as Donald Trump has warped it, then you're defending us becoming China or Russia or what, Viktor Orban tried to turn Hungary into and did for 8 years. So you're defending an institution and a system that is completely broken, but it's like a tick. They can't stop defending it. And the challenge with that, it was, I think it was Malcolm X that said that, the most, untrustworthy person is the white moderate, right? Because what they want, or maybe it was King who said it, because what they want is order. What they want is calm, but not justice. They'd rather have peace than justice. And I think the problem with the Democratic Party is that they take for granted that Black voters will always be there. Black voters are the girlfriend that they won't marry. Black voters are there for them all the time, bringing them a hot plate, making sure that their outfits are darned properly, and they're fixing the rips in their clothing, and they're doing all the things, but they won't put a ring on it. And they will not really commit to Black power because it's disruptive. Black power has always been disruptive in this country. It was Black people who were the first abolitionists because they were the ones who were enslaved. And there were white allies who were getting on board with that idea, but it was Black people who were literally, uprising for their own liberation. And so there's a fear, I think, even among Democrats of actually empowering Black communities because they might vote them out too, right? Like they might want a Mamdani. If you give people the free exercise of power, ordinary people, Black, white, and API and everyone else, they might choose a progressive. And I don't think Democrats want that either. I think they fear a Mamdani style government as much as the right does. And so we're actually fighting moderates in the Democratic Party who would rather have a status quo ante. Like, let's just go back to the Clinton era. Everything will be fine. Maybe the Clinton era wasn't fine for everybody, and maybe the status quo didn't work. And maybe that's why we got Trump. And so I think that because they won't challenge the stability of the system, but just by the nature of the experience of Black people in this country, Black folks always challenge the fundamental nature of the system. I think that scares people like Chuck Schumer, and they enforce this just weird status quo. And the last thing I'll add is they have an Israel problem. They want a status quo that includes the way that Israel was treated when I was growing up, which is as this sacrosanct ally that is always right, that is always the good guy. And that is clearly not true. And there's a clear Israel problem in this country. And the Democrats, for whatever reason, they can't deal with it. And so they're terrified of anyone who challenges Israel as well.
Yeah. And I think the being terrified as well of what happens when we do break away from these things that have kind of plagued our country and we do change the system and then it looks better, right? Yeah. When a Mayor Mamdani is filling 100,000 potholes and it looks better, right? When he's not walking in an Israel Day parade and it looks better. Like, I think that's more than anything what they're worried about. And they're worried about independent media and you as well, which is why I was so glad to have you on. Thank you so much for joining this first episode of the show, Joy. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's so much fun being on, and go Knicks. Let's go all the way. Let's go all the way. We want that ring.
Thank you so much to Senator Bernie Sanders, Congressman Ro Khanna, and of course, my friend Joy Reid. And thank you, viewer, for hanging out, for spending some time with me. And of course, thank you to MeidasTouch for putting on this new show, which we are going to be bringing every single week. So, as always, I'm Jack Cocchiarella, and I'm hoping to see you again